As Jason said, my name is Whitney Grout, and I'm president of the IUPUI College Democrats. I'm very excited and very proud to have all of you guys out here today. I want to encourage all of you to get involved with the College Democrats. It's a great opportunity to get involved on campus and have your voices heard. It is my pleasure to introduce you to someone who you have known as Rudy, Mikey Wash, and Sam Gamgee. He has been working hard these past few months with a campaign for Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton. Let's give a warm welcome to Sean Astin.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I always wonder about the mics. Is this too loud for people in front? And can you hear it up there? Hi, everyone. Well, it was a big failure, big gaping omission in my introduction there. It's always embarrassing when somebody forgets the most important thing you did. I married an Indiana girl. Next time. All right. That's all right. That's all right. She actually went to Indiana University, Purdue. Yeah, oh, she went here. That's right. She went here. I'm very proud of that fact. She's proud of it. We're both getting old now, so she doesn't even know that this building exists. That's okay. I'll tell her she's coming to Indiana. They're on the plane right now, my wife and 3 daughters, my biggest accomplishments. And, sorry. I want to make sure we weren't being overrun. I'm proud to be in Indiana on a several university tour as part of a kickoff for the Clinton campaign here in Indiana. That's a good one to clap for. Hillary Clinton, 2008. If you text 442008, 44th president, 2008, Chelsea. The campaign would love to reach out to you through that, so they'll have a way to communicate with you. So please, I encourage you, 2008 Chelsea. I feel so hip. I know texting. I know about how to talk about it. I don't know if I could actually do it. All right, I'm sorry. Let me focus here for a minute. My mother is a famous actress named Patty Duke, who, thank you very much. She played Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker, and she's done a lot of things. She's been in maybe 200 movies of the week and won 4 Emmys. And she's a beloved person in America. When I go to places around the country, people just love my mom. And she was the president of the 5th largest labor union in the country, the Screen Actors Guild, which Ronald Reagan had actually been president of a generation or 2 or 3 or 4 before her, she would have me say. So I was raised with this passion for taking an active interest in the lives of working people. And as a person who went to community college and then transferred to a 4-year school and was lucky enough to graduate, I say lucky enough because it was hard. Education's really important to me because I have 3 kids. Our environment's important to me. There are a lot of issues that intersect with this campaign, that if you go to hillaryclinton.com and you go to the issues section and you pull down the pull-down menu, there's a whole list of issues. Anything that you might be interested in, there is a kind of a really good bite-sized detailed grab of the positions that Hillary lays out there. And so I am, because of my mother, because of my wife, because of my daughters, one of the things that makes me proud and excited to be a part of the Clinton campaign is that we would be electing the first female president of the United States of America. And I don't know how they do census records on this, but just based on common sense, I'm pretty sure half the country is female, or half the world is female. So what a message it would be sending around the world to people of enlightenment and inspiration and empowerment. That we would, the strongest, most powerful, most gifted and grace-filled nation on earth to elevate a woman. But just the fact that she's a woman obviously isn't enough. She happens to be, in my estimation, an intensely capable human being by any standard. And I go back, I've looked through some of her earlier life experience and what she did in college as a leader on her campus, you look at who your leaders on campus are now, and she was vigorous and active. And one of the things that happened when she gave her speech, she was going to give the valedictory speech, and as the story goes, as I understand it, she put down the speech that she had written, which was most assuredly a very good speech, but because she was addressing a pressing issue of the moment related to something else that one of the speakers had said before her regarding the Vietnam War and her opposition to it. And that kind of leadership demonstrated at that age, and then you fast forward through 35 years of hard, determined work, pushing the envelope at every stage, whether you're the first lady of a southern state, governor, and kind of defying gender boundaries, and then you become First Lady of the United States of America, one of the more sacred roles that we have throughout the history of our country. And I've been telling people that when I study my American history, my degree was in history and American literature and culture, and when I look at my history, I see Martha Washington, Abigail Adams, Eleanor Roosevelt, and I think through the prism of history, when we look back, I think Hillary Clinton will stand a towering figure next to those first ladies because of the way in which she helped to redefine what it meant to be in the White House as a first lady. First lady to have an office in the West Wing. First lady to take a major leadership role on a policy initiative with health care when it was not popular. Very, very impressive thing that she did in bold defiance of convention. Very impressive. The first lady to run for public office and win a Senate seat and then win re-election in a landslide. I could go on, and the right thing for me to do is to introduce Chelsea, but I just want to say that the three reasons that I support her. One, I met her on 2 occasions. One was a speech. One was when we were trying to get money raised for arts funding and education. And in both settings, she was a really extraordinary person to watch and to be in attendance with, and to see her leadership and her command of the issues. And then the other is, as I've already mentioned, the list of policy intersections, the economy, very important here, obviously education issues that Chelsea will talk to, all of those issues. And 3, the most important thing for me is experience. I think she brings an extraordinary and unique experience to her candidacy. All of which you've heard talked about, but I would encourage everyone to really invest some critical thinking into envisioning, if you travel to 80 countries, whether you're in a formal role or an informal role, and what the preparation for each of those trips is, and then what it's like to meet those leaders when you get to those countries, and what you might be thinking about in terms of what your country's needs are and how your people think and what their country's needs are and how they think, and then coming back and then having an ongoing dialogue with those leaders over decades. So to me, that kind of experience, you can't replace that. You can't replace it. I think we would do well as a country to avail ourselves of that level of experience. And simply put, my daughter said to me after knowing and loving the idea of Hillary, as I've taught Hillary to her, and I gave her a balanced look at all of the candidates on both sides of the aisle, and she ended up being a powerful Hillary supporter in her school caucus. Hillary carried it overwhelmingly. I just thought you should know.
She's in 7th grade.
She asked me the other day, right before I came here, the day before I left for Indiana, and she said, Dad, why do you like Hillary? And it was sort of shocking because of everything, all the great stuff, her whole report, and her turning other kids into Hillary supporters, and these kind of things, inspiring them. But she looked at me and she was questioning me. Why are you? She wanted to see if I was just kind of on a conveyor belt. Are you just doing this out of habit that you've been doing it for a long time? And I just looked at her and I realized that kind of innocence and that kind of genuine question is so important and is so emblematic of what a good democracy is about. It's about fostering that real question and about trying your best to answer it and shape it. And my answer to her was this: I like her, and I think she'd do the best job. So without further ado, I would like to introduce a truly extraordinary human being. Who has traveled around the world with her parents. We all know what her life experience is, but I don't know if you know that she went to Stanford and got a history degree, and that she went to Yale and got an international relations degree, and that she's now got a job on Wall Street that I probably couldn't survive for 5 minutes trying to understand what they talk about. But it's my pleasure to be in support of someone you're going to enjoy, Chelsea Clinton.
Thank you, Sean. And hello, everyone. Hi. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you to the College Democrats for your warm welcome. I don't know if you all know this, but you actually can still register for close to another month here in Indiana. So for those of you who are not registered yet, I hope you will register. And for those of you who may be registered as Republicans or independents, I hope that you will think about and switch your registration to the Democratic Party so that you can participate in the primary on May 6th or in early voting starting on April 7th. And for those of you who may be thinking about your party affiliation, I hope that you will kind of listen to the conversation we have here today. I hope you'll go back and watch debates from both the Democratic and the Republican side. There actually have now been 20 debates on the Democratic side, and just a few fewer than that on the Republican side, so that you can hear for yourselves the candidates address the issues that are important to you and think about sort of which party you resonate with. I also hope you will go to my mom's website, as Sean was talking about, HillaryClinton.com, and to all the candidates' websites so that you can see where each of the candidates stand on the questions that are important to you, and you can make your own assessments about whom you really believe have the best policies and plans and ability to deliver on those plans as to what you want to see happen in our country. But I'm here to have a conversation with you all today about why I so passionately support my mom. Not only as my mom, but also as a young woman and as a young voter. And why I believe that on every issue that's important to me, and I think probably some of the issues that are similarly important to you, my mother is the stronger and most progressive candidate who's running. I also do think that she would make the best president. And so I'd like to try to answer as many of your questions today to help articulate that in the context of what is important to you as you think about whom to support. And for those of you who have already decided to support my mom, because I see a few t-shirts and buttons and stickers, thank you for supporting her, but I hope that you'll ask questions too, so that I can help each of you be the best advocate for my mom that you could be. Because I think that that is really also what's so important that each of us do over the next days and weeks, is just to try to reach out and talk to as many people as we can about what's really at stake at this election and why we really believe in my mom, or if we're curious, why we want to hear why other people really believe in my mom. But I'd like to try to offer my take. So I don't know who wants to start, and I'll try to not neglect the people up in the balconies. And if I can't hear you, I'm sorry, I'll just ask you to shout louder. We can play a grand game of telephone. But we'll get to your questions, I hope. So who wants to start? Yeah.
Obviously, Obama and Hillary both seem to be similar on a lot of their issues. And right now, a lot of the media is focusing on a lot of the rhetoric about hope and change and experience. What are some of the actual issues that your mother stands for that sets her apart?
Well, what do you really care about? Equal rights. So his question was, what are some of the main differences between my mom and her leading opponent? And my response was, well, what does he really care about? Because I do think there actually are differences that matter on any issue that would be important. So on equal rights, I'll talk about what my mom wants to do and has done. And then I hope that you'll reach out for information from less biased sources about how other people stand. If you're talking about gay and lesbian rights, my mother has said there's some things that she can do immediately, and there's some things that she could work on to do longer term. Immediately she could extend equal benefits to the 9 million people who work for the federal government. She could end Don't Ask, Don't Tell, because she doesn't think that we should be weakening our military by disqualifying qualified people to serve. She would work with Congress longer term to reform our income tax code, because we still have discrimination in our income tax code against gay and lesbian couples, even those who are in officially state-recognized civil unions in places like Vermont. To strengthen our hate crimes legislation, which currently doesn't adequately protect any of us. Doesn't protect any of us against certain internet-based crimes, and doesn't guarantee any of us the individual right to privacy that my mother believes is a constitutional right. And then we need to have a president who actually believes that enforcing civil rights is important. And civil rights enforcement is 10% under this administration of what it was under my father's administration. And I'd like to think that we're just that much more enlightened and evolved. But lots of people just shook their heads, so I think that's probably not true. So we need a president who understands that we need stronger laws, but we also need more committed enforcement, and then we need to change the dialogue in our country to recognizing that it's not just rhetorically civil rights, but also human rights and individual rights. You know, if you're talking about the issue of gender equality, something that is really personal to my mom, you know, my mom introduced something called the Paycheck Fairness Act years ago now, that she hasn't even been able to get passed through a Democratic Congress, but she keeps trying. What does the Paycheck Fairness Act say, and why is it so important? Women still earn on average 77 cents to the dollar of men in our country. African American women earn 72 cents to the dollar, and Latinas earn 67 cents to the dollar of men in our country. And we know where women are not equally paid, they're more likely to be unequally valued in the workplace, and they're more likely to be unequally valued in their communities and at home. So if we really want to stand up for equality, we need to have equal pay for equal work in our country once and for all. It's something that she's been fighting for, you know, my whole life. It's something she's been fighting for as a senator, and it's certainly something that she will get done as president. So on any issue of equality, I certainly think my mother is the most progressive candidate. So I hope you'll support her. Thank you. Oh gosh. With the stripe, yes, in the back. Well, so his question was, he understands I'm here to help encourage people to get out to vote and to register, which is true. And would I endorse the notion of friendly wagers? Sir, you can bet on anything you want to with your friends or your brother. And if that helps get you all out to vote, then heck, go for it. Yeah. I don't know what else to say, admittedly, yes.
What would your mom like to do with the economy to help strengthen it in the years to come? I mean, we all know that it's kind of, took some hard hits under the current administration and, had been doing well under your father's administration.
Her question was, what is my mom's plan on the economy? Because she knows that it's taken some hard hits under this administration. Well, we know we need to do some things immediately and some things longer term on the economy. Immediately we need to deal with our housing crisis. And my mother, more than a year ago, said that we were going to have a housing crisis in our country and that we were going to be driven into a housing crisis because of subprime mortgages, and we needed to be doing more to help people stay in their homes. And Congress wasn't really interested, and the president certainly wasn't interested. I don't know if you watched the president's State of the Union, but there was one sentence about the housing crisis in the State of the Union, which isn't exactly aligned with what my mother's hearing across our country. And when even the president's own Council of Economic Advisors has said that we could have 1 to 2 million American families facing foreclosure this year, how could we not be doing everything we could to help address that? So what my mother proposed months ago, she keeps talking about in the hopes of being able to push through, to have a 90-day moratorium on foreclosures, to help people work out rates that they can pay with their lenders so that people are able to stay in their homes, and to have a 5-year freeze on adjustable rate mortgages, because a lot of people have told her that they can pay what they're paying now, but they can't pay the higher rate they see on the horizon. This is another big difference between my mom and the current administration, but also her opponents, in that not only is she the only person with a plan to really deal with our housing crisis, but it's something that she has been talking about now for more than a year. And already too many thousands of Americans have lost their homes, and we don't want that to befall more Americans, and also really to start to affect our communities. So that it's not only about helping people stay in their homes, but also understanding that our communities are facing a major budget shortfall as property values go down, As property tax receipts go down, communities have less money to spend on public schools, less money to spend on our police departments, less money to spend on our ambulance corps, less money to spend on our public parks, less money to spend in any area that we think about as being important to our city civic life. So she has a plan to help offset that shortfall so that local communities aren't suffering because housing values are going down. And that's what we need to do immediately. Longer term, we need a new source of jobs in our country, and we need life to be more affordable again for all of us. So that means we need to make sure that energy is more affordable for us. It needs to be true that healthcare, again, is more affordable for us, that education is more affordable for us, that we have a tax code that supports our ability to access those things, and that we have a new source of job growth in our country so that we're actually growing as an overall economy. So I can talk about some of those things specifically if people are curious, but just to talk about jobs for a second. I'm excited that Democrats now talk about green collar jobs, but it matters to me that my mother was the first person running for president to see in fighting global warming a real opportunity to grow our economy, and that she still has by far the most progressive and comprehensive plan to do that. So how will she do that, and how will she pay for that? Because that's another important question that often isn't discussed, but is really critical, because this administration inherited a $5.6 trillion projected surplus and is expected to leave with a $9.3 trillion projected debt. And the budget that the president proposed to Congress last month has a $400 million deficit in it. So he's still running us into debt. And my mother's the only candidate who tells you how she'll pay for everything. That's important because it gives me the confidence and she will deliver on it, because she puts the interests on notice. You're going to have to pay more. But it also is important because it means that we'll get back to a balanced budget and ultimately a surplus. So what does she want to do on jobs, and how will she pay for it? Well, she thinks we should take away the tax breaks that the oil and gas companies received in the 2005 energy bill, something she's the only person who is left running for president to have voted against, because she doesn't believe that we should have given tax breaks to the oil companies when oil was already over $60 a barrel, and that we should institute a windfall profits tax on the oil companies now that oil is close to or over $100 a barrel. That'll generate $50 billion that she wants to use in a few key ways. One, to invest in clean renewable energy technologies so that we're driving down the cost of what we already know works, like wind and solar, but also developing new areas like geothermal and hydrogen, working to see if we can dispose of nuclear waste safely, because a lot of people like the idea of nuclear power, but nobody ever wants the waste in their own backyard. That'll create thousands and thousands of research jobs. And then also we'll create thousands and thousands of manufacturing jobs as we start building the next generation of wind turbines and solar panels here at home, and then constructing wind farms and solar farms to help move us away from our dependence on carbon as a source of energy. That's also good for our security, and that'll help us move away from our dependence on foreign oil. And then to begin immediately start greening our federal government. We talk a lot about cars as being sources of greenhouse gas emissions, and they are. But our buildings are actually larger contributors to greenhouse gas emissions than our cars. So glazing the windows and re-insulating the walls and greening the roofs and changing the light bulbs, and over time linking in our federal government to the new sources of power that we're generating, that'll create millions of jobs. And those are jobs that can't be outsourced, because you have to have people who are right here doing the work. And my mom was the first person running for president to say that she thinks we should raise the minimum wage to $9.25 and then index it to inflation after that, so that they're good jobs with a good wage, and that people then are putting money back into our economy so that our economy gets moving again. And something that is central to her plan, that's distinctive to her plan, is something called a green vehicular bond, where the government would lend money to Detroit and to the auto industry at a low interest rate or a zero interest rate to help the auto industry develop technology that we know already exists in an affordable way, so that we can all afford a car that has an engine in it that gets 100 or 200 miles per gallon. That's good for us, and that we'll feel the sting of $3 or $4 gasoline less acutely. It's also good for our environment. We know that technology exists. It's just not cost efficient yet, either for Detroit to produce or for any of us to be able to afford to buy. That'll also help Detroit get back to being a source of job growth again in our country, and not what we've been reading about now for too many months. But what we really also need to do is to make life more affordable. Right? Healthcare costs have more than doubled under this administration. Education costs are up 70% at the college level and more than 50% at the graduate school level. And so it's not only about making sure that our economy overall is growing, but that each of us has the opportunity to lead the life that we want to have in America. And so my mom is committed to making sure that it's not only that we have more money in our pocket, but that our dreams are more affordable as well. And we can talk about that too. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yes.
What are your mother's views on the war on terrorism, the Battle of Iraq, and there's the talk of a total withdrawal by the end of 2009. Do you actually see that as feasible? Do you think that it could actually get done, bringing 153,000 back, putting them back into a weakened economy?
You just asked a lot of questions, but I'll try to answer them. No, I'm serious. There are lots of hands, but about Iraq. My mother said she would end the war yesterday, if she could. And I'm proud that my mother was the first senator, and not just the first person running for president, but the first senator to ask the White House and the Pentagon what its plans were to end the war. She wrote to the Pentagon, she asked the Secretary of Defense what the administration's plans were to end the war and bring our men and women home. And they wrote back and said they didn't have to tell her. And she wrote back and said, "You do." And they wrote back and said, "We don't." And then she reminded them of this funny thing called the Constitution, and that as a member of the United States Armed Services Committee, they did have to tell her. And I only know what she said publicly, which is at the hearing they now held many months ago, they discussed many things, but ending the war was not among them. President Bush was in the Middle East last month. It's great that he was there. It's tragic that was his first trip there as president. He'd visited our men and women in Iraq before, but he'd never been to Israel, he'd never been to Jordan, he'd never been to Saudi Arabia, he'd never been to Egypt, he just hadn't been. But while he was there, he said that he could see us being in Iraq for 10 years or longer. He's also said that he wants to bind his successor's hand, whomever his successor would be, so that the United States had to keep forces in Iraq. And my mother's leading the fight in the Senate against that, to again remind the administration of the Constitution and its lack of constitutional authority to do that. But unfortunately, we have lots of data points now that the administration is not planning on ending the war. And so what she has said, talking to her military advisors, is that immediately upon taking office, she would convene the Joint Chiefs of Staff and her security advisors and begin planning to withdraw not only our men and women and their equipment, but also begin planning to ensure that the now more than 100,000 American civilians who are there, working in the embassy, working in aid or charity organizations, working for business, can come home safely if they so choose. And then there's a third group of people that my mother is the only person running for president I ever hear talk about. The more than 3,000 Iraqis who have sided with us. And whatever you think about the war, we have a moral obligation to the men and women who help keep our men and women safe. And this administration has done nothing. My mother has been pushing them now literally for years to set up a refugee program for those men and women and their families, and they have done nothing. So we have to ensure that we're honoring their service as well. And based on conversations with her military advisors and her service on the Armed Services Committee, she understands that it would take 60 days to begin to plan to do all of that safely and securely. So that when you hear her say that within 60 days, she'll start withdrawing our troops, that's where the 60 days comes from. She does believe that we could get out most of our combat troops within a defined period, but she has not been willing to say that she will have all of our troops out within a defined period because she doesn't want to set unrealistic or unsafe expectations. Simultaneously with bringing our men and women home, finally sending a clear message to the Iraqis that they have to make What are fundamentally political choices for themselves? My mother opposed the surge in troops when the president proposed it now more than a year and a half ago. But the theory of the surge was that it was going to give the Iraqi people and the Iraqi parliament the time and space to make the tough decisions around questions like, what do they want their country to look like? And how will they divide their oil revenues to support that vision? But those are questions they still have left unanswered. So we can diplomatically support them, but there are no military answers. There are no Iraqi military answers. There certainly are not American military answers to those questions. She was the first person running for president to say that we should reach out to every country in the region more frequently, to our friends, and also to those who are not yet our friends. She doesn't support a presidential visit to Tehran without preconditions, but she believes that we should be talking to the Iranians and the Syrians, recognizing the political reality that we need their support to ensure that Iraq continues on a sustainable democratic path. And we also need to show real leadership again in helping to broker a peaceful resolution between Israel and the Palestinians. When President Bush was in the region, he said that he and his administration would be paying more attention to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That's great. It's a little bit late. They neglected it for more than 6 years. Vice President Cheney is back in the region this week saying the same thing. I know my mother hopes that is true, but their record doesn't support that. But she certainly is committed to, again, having the United States play that role, because we know that until there is a sustainable peace between Israel and the Palestinians, we won't have peace in the region, we won't have security in the region, we won't have peace and security around the world. But it's also about not only sort of doing diplomatically what we need to do, but also getting back to recognizing that foreign policy has developmental components as well as diplomatic ones. You know, something that my mother is really sensitive to, so that we're getting back to more of the programs that we know worked in the 1990s and also those that we know we need to do, so that we have more microcredit and microfinance programs, so that more people in villages in the Middle East, but also around the world, see us as standing up for their dreams. Ensuring that we're funding community health programs based on what works and not based on whether or not they're abstinence only. Finally doing something that my mother fought for as First Lady and that she's been fighting for in the Senate, which is getting rid of school fees. Well, how does that relate to your question, and why is that important? There are a lot of countries in the world, in the Middle East, in Africa, and Asia, where people still have to pay fees to send their kids to school. Now, they're still likely to send their kids to school, less likely, but likely to send their kids to school. But they're very unlikely to send kids that look like me to school. They're very unlikely to send their girls to school. And we know that where girls are educated, women are more likely to be valued as members of their societies. Democracy is more likely to flourish, and development is more likely to be sustained, and the United States is more likely to have friends and allies. So it's not only about ending the war and ensuring that we're diplomatically smarter in the Middle East, it's also about ensuring that we're developmentally smarter and that we have the comprehensive foreign policy that we just have so lacked under this administration. And she'll do all of that. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Oh, gosh, and the green. Sure. I think it's great you're going to be a future educator. Her question was she often hears about the flaws in No Child Left Behind, and she wants to know what my mom will do about it. Well, my mother has said unequivocally that she'll end the unfunded mandate known as No Child Left Behind. And so then the next logical question is, well, what should come after that? Well, my mother's been working on public school reform now for longer than I've been alive. I turned 28 last month, so that makes me feel very old in a college setting. But one of the things that was suspected in the late 70s when she started working on public school reform, we now know to be unequivocally true today, which is that more than half of the achievement gaps that are visible when students graduate from high school between boys and girls in areas like math and science, between minority students and the average, and between students whose families come from the top 25% of family income and students whose families come from the bottom 25% of family income. More than half of those gaps are visible when kids walk into first grade. So we need to do a much better job of supporting our schools and our teachers, but we also need to do a better job of supporting our students and ensuring that we're finally making good on the idea that every child has the right to live up to his or her God-given potential. And so my mom believes that we need to do more to aggressively reach children earlier and to expand a program that she started in Arkansas called IUPUI, so it's easy to remember, that works with now more than 60,000 families in more than 26 states to help parents be the best teachers they can be for our kids. Because so many parents know the value of reading to their children or talking to their children, but they don't know how to. So helping teach fathers and mothers how to engage with their kids on numbers and letters and reading, or to provide that for kids if their parents can't provide it for them. And then reinforcing that learning with universal pre-kindergarten, so that by the time kids get to kindergarten, hopefully they really are on a level playing field. And then in the way that we think about K through 12 education, you ask the question, so you know how No Child Left Behind works, but some of you may not know. Say you're a teacher and you have a class of 25 students and you test them at the beginning of the year and the average test score is a 2. And then you test them at the end of the year and the average test score is a 4. Well, as Sean said, I work in finance in my real life, and that sounds pretty good to me. I mean, a lot of kids made a lot of progress. But if the average test score was supposed to be a 5, everyone's deemed as having failed. Every student is deemed as having failed. The teacher is deemed as having failed. If that happens enough across the school is deemed as failed. The district, and enough across the state is deemed as having failed. And then the state loses money from the federal government. So the next year, the state is actually incentivized to lower the standards and to force the teachers to just teach the test. We're 27th in the world right now in advanced math and science when kids graduate from high school. We should not be lowering our standards. So my mother thinks that we need to have aspirational standards, and that we empower the local districts to figure out how best to meet those standards. Because what a district in rural Indiana may need likely differs from what a district in rural Arkansas would need, differs from the district that I live in now in New York City, or the district where Sean's kids go to school in California. And that we then support teachers and schools in doing that by looking across the country and seeing what really works. Because we do have successful schools at the elementary level and the middle school level and the high school level. And then paying to implement that across the country so that we're leveraging what we already know works. And then finally remodeling our schools that look like they don't even belong in the 20th century, much less the 21st century, and making sure that on the insides our schools all look like they belong in the 21st century. This is something my mom has actually worked really hard on in New York. When my mom was running for Senate, she went to a school in upstate New York where the kids were using a science textbook that honestly had the following sentence in it: "Someday we'll send a man to the moon."
But we did.
Yeah, we did. That's the point. Quite a while ago. So making sure that all of our schools have updated materials and also have updated IT infrastructure and networks so that we finally close the digital divide. And then having a federal incentive pay program so that we're paying teachers more to go into and then stay in underserved areas, to go into our inner cities, to go into our rural areas, to go into our Native American reservations, to go into advanced math and science and foreign language and technology, so that we're making the real commitment not only to our students but also to our future that's just been absent under this administration. And so a fair question is, how will she pay for that? Because it's something that gets back to an earlier question about our economy. Well, my mom believes that we should extend President Bush's middle-class tax cuts, and she wants to reform the earned income tax credit. We can talk about that if people are curious. But that we should go back to the higher tax rates of the 1990s on people who make more than $250,000 a year. Because my mom believes that people who have done well in our country should be part of helping to pay for all of our future. And that will enable her to not only do what she wants to do to reform our tax code, but will also enable her to do everything she wants to do on public school reform, and that's in all of our long-term interest. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for being a teacher. Oh gosh, yes ma'am. So her question was about, again, a sort of multi-part question, but about sort of Guantanamo Bay and the Patriot Act and what my mom wanted to do to help ensure that we were protecting our privacy and our individual rights while doing what we need to do for our security. Well, my mom has been calling to close Guantanamo Bay for literally years now and to enfranchise the detainees there into our legal system so that we actually go back to this other old-fashioned notion of habeas corpus in our country. So she's been pushing for that. And then pushing for the actual oversight that we need of the way in which the Patriot Act is implemented. So understanding that sometimes our government needs extraordinary power, but that there has to be a really high burden for that, and that there has to be an understanding of when and how it's used. And this administration likely has abused it. So she's been calling now for years for more oversight on the Department of Justice for how it's used the Patriot Act, and then also an accounting of the ways in which it has used it so that we understand what's happened. But this administration isn't really a fan of accountability. So she's been pushing for more oversight, and she's going to keep pushing for it, but certainly, hopefully under her administration with Indiana's help, we'll get back to a lot of old-fashioned notions, not only the Constitution and habeas corpus, but accountability and having qualified, competent people to do the jobs they're supposed to do, and all sorts of things that I know that we want to see in our administration. But unfortunately, this administration has been quite the antithesis of that. And Congress, not only my mom, but so many others have been pushing for oversight, not only in those issues, but in others. And the administration has been disinterested at best. Yeah, it's a great question, though. Thank you. Oh, gosh. So many hands, yeah.
As someone who's a high school student during your college administration, I saw great changes for education, while I was there when I graduated. But now as a college student and clearly hoping for a second Clinton administration, what are your mom's plans to help make college more affordable for someone like me?
So her question was, what are my mom's plans to help make college more affordable? It's a great question in a college setting. And one of the things that I am really proud of my mom for that is really distinctive to her is that she doesn't only talk about college affordability and accessibility, but also graduate school affordability and accessibility, so that it's not only helping college be more affordable, but graduate school more affordable. And back to the earlier question of what some of the differences are, this is another big one. So I'm proud that my mom wrote legislation that Congress passed and the president finally signed that raised the Pell Grant maximum to $5,400 and made Pell Grants available year-round for the first time, because historically they had never been available in the summer. But my mom thinks we need to do so much more than that. So what is she proposing? And then on the good theme, how will she pay for it? Well, one, to double Pell Grants to $10,800 as a maximum, and to expand eligibility so that more people can apply for and receive them. To double the current tax credit to $3,500 per student per year, and then to extend those to be available not only for college but graduate school, so that we can use more of our own money, or our families can use more of our own money to help pay for our own education. To expand AmeriCorps, something I'm really proud of my dad for starting. So expand opportunities for public service so that you could earn up to $10,000 for up to 2 years, so a total of $20,000 tax-free to help that money pay for college or graduate school or help pay off college or graduate school. One thing that's really distinctive about what my mom is proposing is to have the federal government get back into the business of direct student lending. And this is something that's really personal to her, because when she went to law school, she borrowed money at 2% from the federal government. I know people are always like, wow, but it's true, 2%. And as importantly, she was able to pay it back as a percentage of her income when she got out of law school. You know, that enabled her not only to fulfill her dream of going to law school, but also then to fulfill her dream of going to work for the Children's Defense Fund on behalf of abused and neglected kids, something that she never could have done if she'd had to worry just about paying off or even servicing her debt. That'll also be good for us because it'll move us away from the predatory student loan practices. But it'll also be good for us as taxpayers because people are more likely to pay back their loans when they can afford them. So making sure that we are in the business of direct student lending, not only for college, but also graduate school. And getting rid of the FAFSA form, which my mother has been talking about now for years, and something she's been trying to do as a senator, because it should never be difficult to apply for aid. So what you could do if you're applying for yourself, or what your family would do if they're applying on your behalf, is just check a box on your tax form, and the government will send you what level of aid you qualify for. That'll also be good for us as taxpayers, because it currently costs our government $4 billion a year to process all of the FAFSA forms. I mean, nothing is good about that equation for anyone. And one of the things that my mom has proposed that I think is probably the most progressive part of her plan is to say to people, if you're willing to do public service when you get out of college or graduate school, if you're willing to be a teacher, like the woman who asked the question earlier, if you're willing to be a nurse or a doctor in a rural area, if you're willing to be a volunteer firefighter or a community police officer or a community health worker, that service itself will count as payment in kind and help you pay off your student loans. And then if you still would have debt after 20 years, it will be forgiven. So it's really important to people my age too, who yes are older than you, as I continually feel the need to confess, because I have a lot of friends who are still making professional decisions based on having to service their student debt. Well, President Bush has proposed repealing the estate tax altogether. And my mother supports the repeal for families with assets of $7 million or less. And that's important because that's so many of our family farmers. But reinstituting the estate tax on families with assets of more than $7 million, that's 0.3% of Americans, but that'll bring back every year more than $8 billion of revenue into our federal budget. And that'll enable her to pay for everything that she has proposed in college and graduate school affordability. Over time, it'll also help her start a National Public Service Academy so that we're making the same commitment to public service that we historically have made to military service. So I hope that if that's what you care about, you'll keep supporting her and you'll talk to all your friends. Yeah, thank you. Oh, wow. Up there. So her question was about illegal immigration and what are my mom's plans on combating illegal immigration. Well, whenever my mom is talking about immigration, she's also talking about security. And I don't know how many of you saw the debate in New Hampshire, but ABC was really proud that one of its reporters had successfully snuck in 2 suitcases full of potentially dangerous material through the Port of New York and then through the Port of Long Beach in California. We still don't know what is coming into our country either. And this administration has never fully funded the September 11th Commission report recommendations, the bipartisan September 11th Commission report recommendations around what we need to do for our port security and our airport security and our border security. And then what the administration has chosen to fund, it's chosen to fund without actually talking to the people who would be most affected. You know, I don't know if you watched the debate in Austin, but during the debate, my mom talked about her experience at the University of Texas in Brownsville, where the proposed wall that the Bush administration wants to build along our southern border, in its current proposed form, would bisect the University of Texas. Can you imagine if someone just split your campus down the middle and you had to go through a border checkpoint to get to history class? So we know that we need to be doing more for our security, but we need to do more to rely on technology and on border patrols, and then where we do need to take extraordinary measures like build a wall, we need to do so only after having talked to local communities. You know, again, one of the tragedies of this administration is how little it has listened or asked. But on immigration more specifically, my mother has said that we need to invite out of the shadows the 12 to 14 million people who are here illegally. We need to register everyone. For people who have committed a crime in this country or their home country, they would be deported. Everyone would have to pay a fine for coming here illegally. And people who hadn't paid taxes would have to pay back taxes as a percentage of their income going forward, so that they were paying for our social services, that they were paying to help support our public schools, that they were paying to support our hospitals and our police departments and our fire departments. And that then people would stand in line behind people who came here legally on a path to earn citizenship. Also, simultaneously, we have to crack down on employers who are exploiting undocumented workers. That's not good for the people who are being exploited, obviously, but that's not also good for Americans who are competing on unequal wage expectations, on unequal labor and health standards. You know, we also need to have a president who's interested in actually enforcing our labor standards, something that this president has, similarly to civil rights, chosen to ignore. It also relates to the larger question of trade. You know, my mother has said that we need to have a moratorium on new trade agreements, and she's the only person running for president who's proposed that, so that we can open NAFTA and our other trade agreements and see what's working and what isn't working, and that we then renegotiate the parts that aren't working, so that we're not only standing up for our workers here at home, and not only standing up for our public health here at home, so that we're not importing toys, for instance, that an American company has made in another country that has lower health standards ever again, that have been contaminated with lead, but that we're also standing up for better working environments and labor rights around the world, so that we're doing more to help create better paying jobs to our southern border and elsewhere. Because we know that, you know, people wouldn't come to our country if they had the opportunity to earn a living wage in a good environment at home. That's also good for us as a country, so that we're articulating our American values through our trade agreements in a way that we just haven't historically. We also then need a president who's interested in enforcing them. Trade enforcement, again a common theme, is less than 25% under this administration of what it was of the 90s. So we do need stronger agreements, but we also need a president who will enforce them. And my mother's the only person who's talked about having a trade prosecutor, so that someone will actually enforce our trade agreements. So it is about immigration, but it's also about our security, and it's also about our values, so that we can be a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants, and that we can do so in a way that helps keep all of us safe and secure, and really better supports labor rights here at home and around the world. Yeah, thank you. Oh gosh, so many questions. Yes, in the red. Oh, good Lord, do you mean me? Oh. I mean, I didn't vote for the second President Bush. I wish we hadn't had a second Bush administration, right? I wish we had President Gore. But No, I mean, you ask a very fair question. I didn't mean to be de minimis, but it is true that I didn't vote for him. I think neither did you, yes. Well, I also meet people all the time who are like, I'm so sorry. You know, like I just didn't get it, and I voted for him again in 2004, and I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's okay. Come to our side. We're happy to have you. Seriously, though, I mean, I don't think you should vote for or against my mother because of my father. I'm very proud of my father. I'm very proud of his time as president, and I'm very proud of the work he does today. I'm very proud of the Clinton Foundation, which is what he does today. You know, the Clinton Foundation gives HIV/AIDS medicine to more than 1 million people every day around the world. And it works on issues here at home like childhood obesity and diabetes with the American Heart Association. You know, I'm very proud of my father. But you should not vote for or against my mother because of my father. You should vote for or against her because you believe that she either is or is not the best candidate with the best plans, with the best qualifications to actually deliver on those plans running. So I hope that you'll make your own assessments and that you'll talk to your friends about kind of what your thoughts are about her independently. Yeah, yeah, sure, of course. No, you cannot offer a thought.
I just want to offer a quick thought of that historically. I mean, if you look at the Adams, right? Yeah, but there's a patriarchal nature couldn't be avoided either, you know, and something that we shouldn't be sheepish about it. I think we live in a media culture and in a time when we think about what's happening right now and what's happening in 10 minutes from now, and we don't necessarily think about what kind of institutions are we building for the future. And it takes a lot to get going in politics, and maybe there should be a lot of adjustments made. But we need to look at right now and the decisions being made right now. And I'm perfectly comfortable with that. If it doesn't happen, I'm going to feel like there was something lopsided. Something wasn't right. I need my extra Clinton in there, please.
And if you were asking about me, my political ambition stretches just as far as helping my mom be my president. I do have a life in New York. I know it's a little difficult to believe at the moment. I have a job, I have an apartment, a dog, a boyfriend. I mean, I'll go back to that at some point. But I'm going to work as hard as I can to help my mom be my president because I think that's in my best interests as a young woman looking toward my future as anything else I could be doing right now. Yeah, oh, absolutely. Well, keep talking to your friends. Yeah, hey. Yes, sir.
Your father, your mother grew up in a very religious, conservative culture. Obviously, it's affected your father in some ways. Is there going to be some kind of backlash to that conservative culture with your mother? Any frustrations toward that? And what role does faith have with your mom? I know we try to avoid all those things, but in a positive way.
His question was, what role does faith have for my mother? And am I concerned that there could be a conservative backlash against her, which I think is a little bit of a separate question. My mother is deeply a person of faith, but it is a very personal relationship for her with her faith, and then for our family with our faith. Someone asked her at a question and answer session in New Hampshire whether or not she would ever have an atheist in her cabinet, and she said, "Well, I don't plan on asking anyone what their religion is." Right, so I think it's something that is deeply important to her personally, and as someone who's been so blessed by my parents and by their sharing of their faith, I appreciate that, but it is a personal and certainly not a political or a public determinant. Yeah.
Kids are taken care of and the people have access to health care, that she's still been able to be painted as this very divisive figure. What do you say to people who insist that despite her background and her history of all of the positive things she's done with her life, that your mother is fundamentally divisive? What do you say to them?
So her question was that despite my mother having spent her whole life working to ensure that more people have access to healthcare and opportunity, that more kids are taken care of and given a chance in the world, that people brand my mother as divisive. And so what is my reaction to that? Well, a couple of things. One, I think partly what you talked about initially. I don't know what is divisive about ensuring that we have more early childhood education in Arkansas now because of what my mother did. But also, if standing up for universal health care in 93 and 94 before it was popular was not exactly popular, I'm still really proud that she did that. I'm also really proud that she still is standing up and fighting for universal health care. I'm also proud that my mom can find common ground. She, by far of anyone who's running for president, has a record of bipartisanship in the Senate, of absolutely fighting for what she believes in when necessary, but also being able to reach across and find common ground with even really unlikely allies. I think probably the greatest repudiation to the element of divisiveness that some people lob her way at times is all the work she's done with Senator Graham. Lindsey Graham is a conservative Republican senator from South Carolina and one of the people who prosecuted my father. Not exactly someone you would think would be an ally of someone with the last name Clinton. But they have done more work with and for our veterans than any other senator has in the last years in the Senate. And that means a lot to me, that she was able to see past personal difficulties to reach out across the aisle and work to ensure that every member of the National Guard and Reserve has health care now. That wasn't true until she and Senator Graham worked on that. Or to ensure that we're fully funding the VA, something that they've had to fight for every year over the objections of the White House and the Pentagon. To ensure that we're investing in areas like traumatic brain injury research so that we know how to take care of our men and women as they are coming home. We're working with Newt Gingrich, another unlikely ally, on safe and secure electronic medical records. Something they haven't been able to get done for all of us, but something they have now been able to get done for every member of our military, every member of our National Guard and Reserve, and every veteran, so that at least our men and women who have served us have a continuity of care. So those are the examples that I think really refute that notion. But also there's certain things that are just going to be unpopular with certain constituents. And as a Democrat, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the fact that my mother is a strong supporter of stem cell research. I'm okay with the fact that my mother recognizes that global warming is a reality and we need to be doing more research aggressively to combat that. I'm okay with the fact that my mother believes in the right to privacy. I'm okay with the fact that my mother believes in equal pay for equal work. I'm okay with the fact that my mother is still standing up and fighting for universal health care. That's what I want in my president. I want someone who can reach across and find common ground, but knows how to stand her ground and fight for what's right, because I think that that's what we all need in our country. Oh gosh. Sure, the guy in the tie. And the She believes that that is a question that Israel and the Palestinians need to answer for themselves. I mean, she thinks that part of the problem that we've had for the last 7 years is been the absence of that dialogue, which certainly the lack of America's participation in has only furthered. So we need to be absolutely committed to supporting Israel and the Palestinians as they have those conversations and making sure that everyone knows it is a priority again for the United States, and that is a priority for not only our security interests but also our humanitarian interests, and that we're willing to do politically and financially what we need to do to help support whatever decisions and solutions they determine for themselves. And that political will and commitment has been absent from this administration. But those are questions that they themselves have to answer. But we need a president who's interested in ensuring that they are answered. Thank you all for having me. I hope that you will register as Democrats. I hope that you'll vote. I hope you'll vote early, and I hope you'll vote for my mom. Thank you very much.